Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Britt Andreatta. I'm the CEO of Seventh Mind Incorporated, and I'm here to talk to you about leading effective change. Just a little bit about my background. I'm the former Chief Learning Officer of lynda.com, which is now LinkedIn Learning, and I have over 10 million views of my online courses. I've also written 3 books on the science of success. So that's what I'm going to be talking to you about today, is particularly I've written a book about change and what it means to move through change, which we're all doing right now. But I also have written books on how the brain learns and how to bring out the best in teams. But today we're going to focus on change. So our agenda during this 3-part series is we're going to talk about these topics. We're going to talk about what change looks like today. And I am going to spend some time talking about this pandemic and what it means for all of us, because we've all been going through it. We're also going to look at how you assess the impact of change, the brain science of resistance, and then strategies for leading change. Because as enterprise leaders, you're all responsible for driving change in your organization and helping your people succeed through it. All of these concepts come from my book, Wired to Resist. So if you want to dig in more to the science or you like some of the details, feel free to follow up by looking at that book. So I'm going to start by talking about what change looks like today. And I wrote the book because this statistic has not changed in decades. Harvard Business Review found that 50 to 70% of all change initiatives fail. And if you think about that, that's just a crazy number. You know, change initiatives are designed by thoughtful people who put a lot of time into making good decisions and working out the details. And yet this number has not shifted in a long time. So I wanted to look at, if we brought a brain science lens to it, could we maybe unlock this mystery? And I believe we have. But when you think about what change looks like, it comes at us in all kinds of forms. So I want to give you tools not only for moving through this pandemic, which I know is really immediate for all of us, but I want to give you tools that you can use in a variety of settings, both at work and at home. So let's talk about change at work, right? Change comes at us in a lot of different forms. So I want you to think about, what changes have you gone through in the last year or so? Perhaps you had a new job or a new role, or maybe you were assigned to a new team. That's one type of change. Perhaps you have a new manager or a new leader in your function or your organization. Perhaps you're dealing with different colleagues than you did in the past. Maybe you're rolling out a new technology or starting to use a new process. You know, digital transformation is a big part of what a lot of organizations are going through, for example. So that may be something that you're working with. Perhaps your organization is designing or developing a new product or service that you want to roll out to customers. And that, of course, is connected with working in a new market, dealing with a different kind of customer and getting ready to meet their needs. And now that we're globally connected, that means that we're also working with a new country, perhaps engaging with different cultures and having to learn customs and ways of working. And then you can also have, you know, a sudden change to your whole future. This happened to me. I came to work one morning and was announced that our company had just been purchased. And I was now reporting to a different person 500 miles away. And everything shifted overnight. So we can also, through mergers or acquisitions, sometimes reduction in forces, all kinds of things can all of a sudden give us a new future that we were not necessarily anticipating. And then all that change at work can also drive personal change. Perhaps you have to move, which means you're then navigating a new home, a new school, if you have children, a new community, all those kinds of things. So all of that was already happening. You probably have already been going through some of these changes. And then globally, for the first time ever, we had a change that is impacting every single one of us around the world. We have the COVID pandemic that's unfolding right now. And very suddenly, it shifted all kinds of things about how we work, how we school our children, where we spend our time. Everything was upended very quickly. So I want to give you some strategies for not only dealing with the change we're just moving through. I don't know about you, but you know, it's been a long haul already. It's been exhausting. It's been stressful. I think we've already moved through quite a bit, and we know there's a lot more to go through. So I want to give you some tools that we can apply to not only what's happening now, but everything that you'll be dealing with in the future. So let's talk about different ways to assess the impact of change. Not all change is the same. So we can look at change as kind of having some different elements to it. One is, you know, how long it takes to get used to that change, time to acclimation. Another thing is how much disruption that change causes in your life, right? Sometimes it's just a little bit, sometimes it upends everything, like kind of what we've been doing. How many total number of changes you're holding at the same time also matters. So for example, when my company was purchased, I was already in the middle of moving my mom to assisted living and doing a kitchen remodel. So if they had asked me if now was a good time for major change, I would have said, no, thank you. But I didn't get a choice in that, right? So also how many changes you're holding can impact you and how fast those changes are coming. Are you getting time to kind of slow down and kind of recover and get used to the new normal before something else shifts? So we can take all of these elements and kind of look at how they play out, but these are ways to consider, how much is change going to impact me or the people I lead? Another piece of data I want to give you is that there's been a lot of research done on the emotions of change. Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross did a lot of research on the emotions of change that play out, and now lots of studies have really verified that this is the case. Usually her curve is seen upside down, it goes as a valley. I flipped it to look more like a mountain because it's honestly how change feels to me, and it felt like it better represented these emotions. So what we know is when change is announced, the first emotions that humans hear are shock, fear, and denial, even when it's a good change. And then we move to anxiety, stress, and anger. And then we get to confusion, frustration, and depression. And all of these quote unquote negative emotions, and I put them in air quotes on purpose because really there's no emotion that's a bad emotion, right? They're all valid and legitimate. But all of these difficult emotions come up at the beginning because of our biology. We are wired to look to the past and what we might lose in a change. So it's just kind of part of our wiring. I'll explain more when we get to the brain science section, but just know it's not something we can really stop ourselves from doing, or we can't really like make ourselves get over it faster. It's just part of how we're wired as humans. And really what's going on here is it's a form of grief. We're really thinking about, oh, but I liked working with Bob. Now I'm not going to get to work with Bob. I don't know how I feel about that. Or I really liked the tasks I was working on before. What if I don't like the new stuff? It's typically, we think about what we might lose. Then we get to the peak of resignation. And there's actually 3 types of resignation that can happen here. The first is that people quit the change. Forget it. I'm out of here. I'm not doing this. So they might quit the job or quit the organization or quit the change, whatever it is. A second type of resignation is that people get on board with the change and they think, well, I guess this is happening. I better get with the program here. So they resign themselves to getting on board with the change. So then they start to say, all right, this is happening. Better start working on it. And then the third type of resignation is that the leaders who announced and designed change that they thought was pretty awesome, and then were really surprised to see all these kind of difficult emotions show up. Sometimes they can decide, oh no, this is bad, let's pull the change. Let's stop this change initiative. When really they just needed to wait a little bit longer. Because biologically, while we're first wired to resist change, we are also an incredibly adaptive species. So the second thing that kind of happens is that we then are able to look toward the future and start to look for potential gains. And so we go over this emotional tipping point and we start to experience, various levels of hope. We first have some acceptance and some curiosity. We still have some healthy skepticism thrown in. Then we have hope, creativity, engagement. This is when we start to have good ideas about the change. And if you're leading change, this is kind of when all of a sudden everyone's like, oh, have you thought about this? And why don't we try that? And you're like, well, wait a minute, I've been talking about this for a long time. How come you weren't saying anything before? Well, they were processing their frustration before, but now they're on board. And then people can even get impatient, like, all right, already, let's get this done. And they even get excited about the change. And then eventually you arrive at the new normal. So we know that this is kind of what humans do. It's not always perfectly linear. Sometimes you have a day where you're hopeful and creative and then you slide back to frustration. But what I want to tell you as leaders of change is that even if you roll out change perfectly and you're doing a great job, you cannot make this go away. It's just how humans are. So they're not being difficult. They're being human. But what you can do is there's some strategies you can use that can shorten the time and lessen the height of the disruption and resistance. And we'll talk about that during this training. But I just want you to know that even when you do it great, people are still gonna have feelings about it, okay? I also like to talk to organizations because most organizations I work with spend a lot of time designing the change initiatives, right? So it's structural, it's factual, there's a plan, sometimes many binders full of a plan, and you execute the plan. But most change succeeds or fails on this other side, which is the human side, how your people feel about it, right? It's emotional, it's a reactive thing. It's ultimately a process that they move through and eventually people adjust. So what I encourage you to do is think about, yeah, we got the change plan, but what do we need to do on the human side, the transition side, to help people get on board and move through more smoothly? So I want to give you a new way to thinking about change. Not all change is the same. So if we think about time unfolding along the bottom, and the vertical axis is like how much disruption that change is going to cause, and disruption becomes a really good indicator of how much resistance you're going to get. There's actually 4 different types of changes we can be unfolding. So it's important to kind of know, what am I asking of people? If you've got something that's going to take a long time to get used to or move through, and then it's going to have a high amount of disruption, it's going to have all those emotions we just talked about. I call this the long and intense climb. And it looks like this, emotionally it feels like, oh no, I'm going to have to walk this whole thing. Look at how hard that is. Oh gosh. And even if I know I have to do it, I think many of us feel this way about this pandemic. Like, we don't know how this thing's going to unfold yet. We know it's going to take months. We have to do it. But most of us are like, oh, I don't know. This is going to be hard, right? So that's one type of change. Another type of change that rolls out in organizations is stuff that is equally disruptive, but you have less time to do it. I often think of like when you roll out new software as an example. Even though the IT team has been spending a lot of time in the background making it work, they push the button and then all of a sudden one day, the rest of us have to deal with that new software just almost overnight. So you have all the same emotions, but now it happens in a compressed time period. This is a quick hike up a steep hill and it feels like this. I'm gonna have to exert some energy. I'm gonna have to push, but I can see the top and I know it's not gonna last very long. For many of us, this is kind of the work from home part of this pandemic. It's like, oh, we had to suddenly make a change. It was difficult at first, but now, we've kind of settled into it and we knew it wasn't gonna last forever. Then there's a third type of change, which is change it's going to take a long time to unfold, but it's not very disruptive. Some examples in organizations are perhaps a regulation is going into effect 2 years from now, and you've got time to get ready for it. So you're just going to be slowly chipping away at it, building it into everyone's kind of regular work. So the emotions here change a little bit. They're not quite as dramatic, and you'll notice that boredom, impatience, and relief become part of the thing here. I call these long and steady treks because they feel like this. You're going to require some endurance. People are going to need some stamina. They're going to be out on the trail for a while, but it's not any heavy lifting. It's not any intense climbing. So it has a different feel than that original mountain we looked at. And then finally, you've got change in your organization or at home where it's very quick and it's not disruptive. It's small, right? I call these pebble on the path or pebble on the trail because it's essentially a non-event. People shouldn't even notice it. They kind of keep on moving. So now we have some new ways of thinking about change because not all change is the same. So this gives you a way to start diagnosing and assessing change that you're going through or that you're asking other people to go through. So now this gives you 4 different ways to think about change, and it gives you the ability to diagnose and assess what you're going through or what you're asking other people to go through. One of the activities I recommend is that you actually map it out. So I'm going to encourage you to do this. You can just grab a sheet of paper and put time along the bottom, and your vertical axis is how disruptive it is, another indicator of resistance. I like to break it into quarters because in business, we work in quarters. So let's take a look at what one organization might be going through. You might have a change of rebranding the product. You might have a couple small changes. Perhaps you're migrating to new software kind of at the end of Q2. Maybe you've got, some other small things happening. You're going to be going through a merger process and you're revising some policies. I also like to add rhythm of the business across the top. Because, let's look at this migration to new software. People are going to be hitting that peak of resignation when they're most frustrated, right when the engagement survey comes out. So you can kind of anticipate what's going to happen, right? People are going to be brutally honest on that engagement survey and probably have a lot of complaints. So if you know that, you can plan in advance and either choose to take a hit on your engagement scores, or you could move one of these things a little bit and make it so that they're not hitting at the same time. You can also lay in here, you know, other things like oftentimes if people are hitting the peak of resignation right around a stock vestiture, you can see oftentimes that there's more people who turn in their resignation right after that. So it gives you time to kind of assess stuff. You can also look for times when people are going to be holding a lot of change at the same time, because that's an indicator as a leader that you need to be offering more support and guidance during those windows, or you should take an option of moving something. And now, regardless of what your map looks like, for all of us around the world, we all of a sudden had this huge pandemic dropped on us right around the end of Q1 is kind of when we started to hear more about it. It was earlier for some countries. And then this whole stay-at-home thing, right? Stay at home, work from home. So in addition to whatever you had going on personally and professionally, all of us have this added on the top. So one of the things that I want you to think about is, you know, in addition to the types of change journeys you're asking people to go on, the people going on them are people. But sometimes they're your employees, sometimes they might be your customers, sometimes they might be your clients, because I don't know who they're always going to be. I didn't want to call this kind of the employee journey because, you know, it might be different. So I call them the travelers. Whoever you're asking to go on a journey, they're the travelers on that journey. And I want to give you one more kind of diagnostic tool, which is it's really helpful to look at how motivated they are for change. And basically motivation comes down to two kind of things. Did they choose it? Yes or no? And do they want it? Yes or no? So that gives us kind of 4 windows. In the yes, yes category, like let's say someone applies for a new job and they get it. Even though that's going to be disruptive, they're excited about it. They want it. So they're going to bring a lot of positive forward moving energy to it. Like they're really excited about it. When the company that I was working for was purchased, for me, it was, yes, I want that because I really was excited about the company that purchased us, but I hadn't chosen it. So I was going to embrace the opportunity. It was awesome, but I didn't have the same energy as if I had planned to upend my life, right? So I was walking toward it. Then we have the change that we did not choose and do not want. So our physical kind of response to that is like, no, don't make me do this. We can't help but kind of resist a little bit and dig in our heels. And then we also have this weird category of we choose it, but we don't want it. So we're kind of getting on board for it. We're not excited about it. So we have this energy of enduring it, accepting the situation, trudging along. An example might be taking a reassignment that you're not really excited about, but it sets you up for a future promotion, or taking a job because it's better than not having a job at all. Or many of us feel this way about the pandemic. We're making choices in our life, not that we're excited about, but we're doing it for the good of others, or to help protect people we care about, or because, you know, we have to, because we're being asked to by government agencies. So I want to give you some time to kind of put those two things together, because in addition to looking at what we ask people to do, we can now kind of add, well, how excited are they about it? And when you have people who are running toward it, like that rebrand product, if you're leading a team that's really excited about it, it requires less leadership from you than taking the trudgers or the resistors on a bigger change. So this gives you a little bit of data like, if I've got people who are not really on board, I'm going to have to do more as a leader to get them on board and to support them through the change. So as we wrap up this first part, I want to give you a little time to reflect on that. Take a few moments, grab a blank sheet of paper and draw out what you're looking at. Think about changes that you're leading and how your people feel about them. And then when you're done, don't forget to add the pandemic, because that's still happening and it's on everyone's plate, whether we count it or not. All right, this is the end of part 1. I'll see you in part 2.